Listen, y'all been in my inbox asking when I'm coming back? Well, guess what? I'm back. Landlord and Tenant Talk Uncensored is now live every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, as well as TikTok. So grab your pencil, your paper, and your sippy cup, because I'm spilling the tea and nothing is off limits. We're talking about security deposits, inspections, housing programs, bad tenants, slum landlords, late rent, and yeah, we're talking about retaliation. We're also talking about how to fix it all without losing your mind. I'm calling it like it is. No fluff, no fake advice, just the truth landlords and tenants need to hear. So whether you own the building or you pay to stay in it, this weekly live is for you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Monday Live Landlord and Tenant Talk with me, Karissa Spann. I'm super excited to have you join me tonight. We are diving into one of the most debated topics in the rental housing space, and that's simply security deposits. So I know that for many of you who are landlords, you consider that a safety net, and yet for tenants, it can be a financial hurdle. I also am excited to share that I do have a special guest who will be joining me tonight. I just want to say that information that I share is not legal advice. However, we will be discussing tips, practices in the industry. Thank you so much for showing up live on the YouTube channel. I'm live on LinkedIn and I'm live on Facebook. So on the show, one of the things that I do is I give space for both perspectives. So for you, whether you're a landlord or a tenant, the one thing that I do want landlords to know and understand is this: you always need to protect your rental property. And also tenants, you need to understand what your rights are. There needs to be clarity, and there should also be fairness in the process. So that's why tonight's conversation is so important, because it's all about bridging the gap and making sure that everyone understands their responsibilities before the lease is signed. So without further ado, I am going to bring in my guest, and she is no stranger to the space. This is Sheena. I'm excited to have her on.
I can't hear.
Sheena, are you with us?
I can't hear anything.
Okay, I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
All right, so it looks like we're having some type of technical challenge. So give me one moment, everybody. Let me try to fix my audio.
Can you hear me? Because I can't hear you. I can't hear you, though. It's weird.
All right, so we are going to work on
I still can't
audio.
hear.
All right, give me one moment, everybody. We are working through technical challenges. Give me 1 second.
Can't hear. I don't know what's going on. I have my volume up. As high as it's going to go. I don't know what's going on. I can't hear on my end.
All right, so we're working through those challenges, and I do apologize, everybody. So I'm going to bring Sheena back in, going to have her to work on her audio. But tonight's session is so important because I know that a lot of people are concerned about when it's time to move in, what that process looks like when it comes to the security deposit for tenants. And so today's discussion is really centered around individuals who are participating in some sort of housing program. Let me try to get Sheena back to the stage and see if that will resolve our technical issue we had a few moments ago. All right, welcome back, Sheena. Can you hear me? All right, Sheena, you're live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Can you hear me okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just get started with the discussion on today. We're going to have Sheena to come back on. Sheena is she's a she's a community activist and she works with a lot of tenants in the rental community in the DC metropolitan area. I'm excited to have her join me today. Um, so as soon as she comes back on, I'll bring her back on the screen. But today, the session today is all about the security deposit. And I know that for some of you, this may be information that you're already aware of, but there are a lot of people who are not knowledgeable about the process when it comes to the security deposit. And so let me see, from an early stage getting into property management, I learned very fast how things can shift quickly when owners are not knowledgeable about the do's and the don'ts of the security deposit. So, from the tenant's perspective, I am going to give some tips for you from as well as the landlord's perspective. So, if you are a tenant, please make sure that you're taking notes today. If you are a landlord, please know that I'm going to share tips for you. So be prepared to take notes. Listen, if you have questions, if you have comments, remarks, or observations, please drop it in the comment section so that I can address it and respond to it accordingly. So the security deposit, as a matter of fact, let me bring it up on the screen, what the security deposit is, what it's for, so that everybody is clear. I do know that some of you are not landlords. And so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. I see that I have Sheena back. Let me see if I can bring her back on stage here. Sheena, welcome back. You're live. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Beautiful. Welcome back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Listen, I'm excited to have you join us today. So I know that today we're talking about the security deposit and we're going to touch on what it means for tenants who are in the voucher program. But I'm going to pause, I'm going to back up, and I'm going to allow you to do an introduction, share with the people who you are. I've explained that you are a community activist, that you work in the DC metropolitan area, but you share with the people a little bit about yourself and what you do, what makes you so amazing.
My name is Sheena. I am a DC Housing Authority Housing Choice Voucher recipient, and I am very grateful for. Without the program, I wouldn't know how I would survive. But I also support my community in any needs that's met. If anyone comes to me and they need help, just getting to the Social Security building, I will take them. If anyone comes to me and they need help with an application, I will assist them through processing the application. Any means necessary. If I don't know, I will find a way, the right way, the legal right way. I love helping my community. I'm all for the community, and I'm all for helping anybody that I can possibly can. Miss Spann is also one of my mentors, and I look up to her, and I've been working along with her for a very long time. She's a wonderful woman. Um, Outside of that, I just love helping my community any way I can.
And you know, I love your positivity, the fact that you go above and beyond. You don't just stop with where you are. You don't stop with just helping your family, but you really reach out to help the needs of those who are in need. And it's not just in your community, right? And I love that about you because it really takes a heart to do what we do in the industry as it pertains to helping others. So I want to share first before we start what a security deposit is. And then I have some questions that I want to ask before we get into tips. So today we're talking about when the security deposit goes wrong, right? So let me bring up on the screen here what a security deposit is. So usually when a tenant moves in, before a tenant moves in, this is money that a tenant gives a landlord upfront as a protection against damages or unpaid rent. Now, I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what the security deposit is before Sheena and I get into this conversation, because there seems to be a slight misunderstanding for some new landlords or people who are maybe not new landlords, but perhaps they've been a landlord for a while, and yet maybe they inherited the property, right? Or maybe they purchased a property with a tenant in place, and then perhaps the tenant moved out, a new tenant moves in, and now there's some confusion about what the security deposit is for. So I see your comments coming in. Thank you so much, Kim. She's tuning in from South Carolina. Thank you so much, Kim. So, Sheena, what I want to do is I have a few questions I do want to ask before we get into the heart of the discussion on today, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because, and again, any of you, if you have questions, please throw it in the comment section. If we're moving a little too fast, slow us down, let us know. If there's some audio issues, please let us know because we know that sometimes technology is not our best friend. All right, so Sheena, let me do this. I think I want to start with, and I wrote down some questions here, but I think I want to start with when it comes to the security deposit. Now, here's what I do want you to know, that the laws are similar. They may be the same, but they could be different in different jurisdictions. So when it comes to the security deposit, one of the biggest differences is the amount that a landlord or an owner can request from the tenant before they move in. So I want us to go over some questions that I've prepared for us on today, Sheena. And I'll pause after I ask the question. I'll let you answer it. And then we'll come back a little later for tips for landlords and tenants. And then I have a segment that I do, which is titled Truth or Trash. So the first question I have for you today is, from what you've seen, Sheena, how common is it that tenants think the housing authority will pay their deposit?
Very common. You have a lot of tenants that think that the housing authority is obligated to pay their security deposit. The program operates in many different ways. For DC Housing Authority, from my knowledge, if you're a first-time housing choice voucher, so you have many different vouchers that's under the DC Housing Authority. You have a local voucher and you have a federal voucher. When you're dealing with the local voucher, from my understanding, they will assist you with your security deposit periodically. When you have a federal voucher, you're only able to get assistance every 2 years. That's what I know for right now. Now, with everything going on, things can possibly change. From my experience with my peers and seeing people in comments on Facebook and just knowing people, a lot of people tend to move into units based off of the housing authority paying their security deposit. So let me give you an example for myself. If I was to move into a unit, I had a landlord that was willing to accept me for a unit. The landlord is aware the housing authority will pay my first month rent. I have submitted my paperwork to housing authority for a security deposit. So some landlords are not so much familiar with the program. They'll say, okay, well, housing authority I know is going to pay their first month's rent, and the tenant has told me, okay, yes, they're going to pay my security deposit because as the landlord filled out the form and submitted it to housing. So by them not having that much understanding of the program, they're allowed the tenant to move in. And I had this happen to someone, and the housing authority came back and did not pay that tenant's security deposit, which left the tenant responsible for the security deposit. And at that moment, the tenant and the landlord then had disagreement and it became a problem. So from a tenant's point of view, being fair, I advise the landlords to wait till you get cleared through housing authority before you allow anyone to move in.
And that's good. And I'm glad that you did expound on the different types of vouchers. There are different categories of vouchers. You know, you touched on the local as well as the federal voucher, and there is a difference. And so, from a tenant's perspective, tell us, how does it feel for tenants? Like, what have you what if you gather from tenants in terms of how does it feel when a tenant realized they're responsible after they've signed the lease and now the landlord said, well, hey, the agency didn't pay the security deposit for you, you're now responsible. Speak to that for us, please.
So you have some tenants that a big anxiety would kick in. Some tenants, you have a different personality, so it's based on the person itself. So you have some tenants with panic, anxiety, go out here to programs to try to get resources and help. Some tenants work where they are able to pay themselves, but we also got to keep in mind right now today. So if I have a landlord today that tomorrow have this issue, we also got to keep in mind that in the District of Columbia, the programs out here are out of funding. So we have to make sure that we understand programs as well out here when we're dealing with tenants, what's available to possible tenants, where they can possibly get assistance before you assist them. So you'll know on both ends, well, this if housing is not paying this tenant security deposit, is there a program out here that could possibly help this tenant? So that's good information for the landlord to know if they want to work with a tenant. So for my own personal, I'm going to pay my security deposit because it's nothing is promised. So even with doing the paperwork to housing authority, submitting the security deposit form, anything is possible. So from a tenant aspect, I advise tenants to save before you go because anything is possible. Nothing is promised.
Okay. And so you kind of touched on the next question that I have, which is what advice would you give a tenant to protect themselves before moving into that rental property? And so, do you think better communication from the housing agency will help both tenants and landlords?
Yes.
Yeah.
Better communication. That way, DC Housing Authority communicating to the landlord what they will be paying and communicating to the resident as well what they will be paying. But as the resident and the resident responsibility, the resident needs to have a responsibility to know that this might not happen, period. So let me also save money so I can be prepared if this is what I really want.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I do know that some voucher tenants, they're sometimes told that that housing will cover the security deposit, and then later it's not included. That usually happens on the local level. And so, in addition to the housing authority, there are other housing programs such as rapid rehousing. You have pathways. I mean, there are so many housing programs out there. So it's not just isolated or specific to the DC Housing Authority. Um, but I know that tenants are already locked into leases, um, and they go through this. And so landlords expect payment directly from them. And when that happens, I notice that one of the biggest things is that it does create a level of stress. It creates
Correct.
it creates financial hardship, you know, especially for tenants who believe that everything was covered. And so, um, like you, Sheena, my message to tenants is that they shouldn't move in not knowing what's being paid as pertains to the rent, any deposit or fees. I do have
So
a,
I want to give some feedback.
go
I
ahead.
want to give a little bit of feedback on just a little bit of that. For me, for an example, like you said you sometimes it'll kick back that housing would not pay. At the end of the day, housing has my subsidy. I'm still responsible, regardless of what goes on. So if housing stop paying my housing choice voucher subsidy today, I am still responsible for this rent. So tenants also got to keep that in mind when they're dealing with landlords. Just because you have a subsidy, you're still responsible if anything happened at the end of the day. So that's something that we all have to remember and be prepared for.
I love that. So Sheena, what do you want landlords to understand about the tenant's experience in these type of situations?
So I've been dealing with a lot of my peers lately, and they are dealing with issues with landlords and housing authority. Right now, it's a lot going on with the economy and just a lot. So, housing authority is a little backed up in things. Paperwork is not moving fast. Right now, the main key is patience. If you have the time, if you have the patience. Moving on to another voucher holder, you're going to have the same situation. Patience. You have some workers moving fast, some workers not moving fast. It's all
Mm-hmm.
across the board, it's everywhere. Everybody, right now, the main thing we got to do is patience and pray. Patience and pray. And understanding.
Patience. It does take a lot of patience when you, as a landlord, are relying on a deposit to cover unpaid rent, to cover damages, right? And so I know that sometimes landlords, they're thinking, even at the beginning stage when they're signing a lease, they're thinking towards the end, what will happen if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, or what's going to happen if there's damage. And so I know that a lot of landlords are relying on those deposits to cover that, because here's the thing: if they don't receive it, then they're left exposed. And I know that sometimes there is miscommunication from housing agencies, and that can definitely lead to frustration and mistrust. I am currently working with a few clients who have not had the best
So,
communication record with the
I do
housing.
know when I moved here where I am,
Did I lose you, Sheena? Can you repeat the last thing you
it
said,
was going
Sheena?
in and out. I'm sorry. So I've been I'm sorry. No, I was trying to listen to you because it was going in and out. I have a young lady right now that I'm kind of assisting with communication with housing authority. And I understand your question about deposits. That's why I advise landlords. So I do know. So it's kind of tricky because when I moved here, where I housing authority moved, they told me to move in on the first, and I went on and moved in, but my landlord did not have my first month rent, nor did they have my security deposit at move in. So the housing authority operates on a first of the month and a 15 a month basis where they issue payments. So you either get your payment on the first of the month or the 15th of the month. Housing authority, has an agreement with the landlords. The landlords call and talk to housing authority. Always get something in writing in black and white from housing authority stating that they will be paying this tenant's security deposit moving forward. If you don't have anything in black and white, then I would not, housing authority case management, we will have to have a conversation. There's a lot of that going on. So you need something in black and white. So if they're saying, okay, this tenant can move in, give this tenant the keys on October the 1st, as a landlord, you have a right to request it in black and white. The housing authority will be covering their security deposit and first month's rent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Landlords should always confirm in writing whether or not the housing agency is going to pay it. And
Mhm.
I do know this, Sheena, from the from my perspective as a property management professional. I know that sometimes tenants, even if the agency is not paying their security deposit, I know of cases where tenants stretch the truth. Let me just call a spade a spade. They flat out lied and said that the housing agency was going to pay the security deposit when they knew good and well that the agency was not. And so, how would you address that, or what advice would you give tenants who may not have the money, but yet they know that the housing agency isn't going to pay, and yet they still tell the landlord that the agency is going to pay?
That's tricky right there because how do you know if they lied or not? Not until they actually get into the home or the apartment, right? So then that's
Mm-hmm.
when I piggyback on the landlord, making sure from housing authority, ask that tenant, can I have your caseworker's telephone number, email address, and then as a landlord, reach out to that caseworker or whoever that contact person is to find out and get something in black and white. I would not move forward with the application or anything until I've spoken with that caseworker because we do have a lot of that going on as well.
Absolutely. Because, and like you said, if housing doesn't pay, but here's the thing, the tenant is still contractually responsible for that security deposit. So if they don't have anything in black and white that they can present to the landlord, if housing has not agreed to pay it, then the tenant is still responsible for the security deposit, which is why
So
I'm
let me tell you.
go ahead. Let me hear what you have to
I'm
say.
sorry, Mr. Spann.
Go
It's
ahead.
So it's like in and out. So it's like, sounds like to me you're stopping. So I'm thinking you're stopping because it's like in and out. So my lease is up here in January. I reached out to my caseworker 2 days ago and I said, "Hey, Miss Red, my lease is up in January. Moving forward, you have Thanksgiving coming, you have Christmas coming. I do know that, right now housing is backed up. I want to move from the unit that I am in and I want to move forward. What would be a good time for you to schedule me a briefing moving forward so I won't get caught up in the Thanksgiving holiday or the December holiday?" She said, "Well, Miss McGill, you can start looking at October and start submitting your paperwork in the end of October, beginning of November, so we can get that situated in your briefing." So I said, "Well, Miss Red, I've already had my security deposit paid once." She said it's only for 2 years, every 2 years. She said, "So we would not be paying your security deposit moving forward because it's only once every 2 years." So we're in September. So I know it's September and I know my lease is up December 30th and I want to move by January 1st. So this gives me enough time to save three, four, five, six, seven, $800. I know the amount of my voucher and I know what I'm not going to go over and I know what my budget is. So I had to plan ahead. So this is my advice to the tenants.
And that's good because I think that when tenants understand it from that perspective and hearing it from you as a tenant, it helps them to understand that it's always better to prepare. And here's the thing, it's better to have it and not need it versus needing it and not having it. So let me do this. I want to share some tips. Sheena, I think I'm going to start with landlord tips first. But before I do that, I do want you to know that as a landlord, it is so imperative for you to understand the laws around the security deposits because if not, tenants can sue you. And that's one of the biggest reasons that landlords are being sued because they're not returning the security deposit, or maybe they're returning a partial amount of the security deposit. That's something that you don't want to do. So, as a landlord, I do have tips for you on today. I'm going to start with my landlords first. You want to make sure that you verify the voucher coverage. You want to make sure that you understand how much is going to be covered. You want that to be spelled. You want it also to be spelled out in the lease. Let me pause. I want to bring this on the bottom of the screen here because this is so important. So that's my tip. Landlords, if you have tenants who are participating not just in the housing authority program, but any housing program, verify it. Make sure that it's in writing. Don't just take a person's word. And yes, you can contact the agency and they'll say, okay, well, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, this is the rent and this is the security deposit that will be paid. Get it in writing, right? You want to make sure, as I indicated, that it's spelled out in the lease. It should clearly state in the lease how much the security deposit is. Number one, right? You want to do that. You want to also indicate when the security deposit is due. And I know that usually that money comes in before the tenant moves in. However, when tenants are participating in housing programs, that money will not be paid before the tenant moves in. That means that the housing agency will pay it either the first of the month. If it's a housing authority that doesn't have a mid-month check run or a housing agency that only has one payment, right, schedule, then unfortunately you won't get that money until after the tenant moves in, which is why you want to verify it, get that promise in writing. You also want to stay consistent. You want to treat all voucher tenants the same as any other renter. Don't waive deposits unless it is the policy for all tenants. Why? Because you can find yourself trying to do the right thing and end up getting sued for alleged discrimination. Here's another tip for you as a landlord. Always, always, always collect before you give the keys. Don't allow a tenant to move in unless you receive the payment. And again, unless that payment is coming from the housing agency, which in that case, the housing agency will pay the money. It may not be before the tenant moves in. It just depends on the process. It depends on the timeline. It depends on a number of variables. If that paperwork has been completed in advance, but if not, know that the agency will pay it. But don't hand over possession of that rental property unless you have something in hand before you give the tenant the keys. Okay, I'm gonna come to you after I give this last tip, Sheena. You, as a landlord, you want to communicate early. Ask those questions, like Sheena said. Ask those questions early. Ask those questions up front, because if housing fails to pay, you need to notify the tenant right away. Hey, listen, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, housing has not paid your security deposit. I need you to reach out to the caseworker, the supervisor, or provide me with your case workers, your specialist information, so that I can reach out to them and then work on a plan so that this matter is resolved and it doesn't become an issue that grows. Sheena, go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention a lot of the tenants receive vouchers and they don't know, some of them don't even know where they come from. Not all vouchers come from housing authority, and different programs out here are paying different deposits. You have some of them are only paying 700 and the tenant are responsible for the remaining. So it's very important that you also know what type of voucher the tenant has and under what program.
That is a good point. That is a good point. There are a lot of housing programs. There are different pots of money. And I know that many people are more familiar with the Section 8 voucher program. I want to go to my tenant tips now, because we have not left you out. We do have some tips for you as a tenant. So, as a tenant, please always confirm what's covered before you move in. Before you sign that lease, get in writing whether or not your voucher will cover the deposit. And usually, here's the thing, let me pause, let me put a dime in the meter and park right here for a second. Even if the housing agency is paying the security deposit, there are usually forms that must be signed. So if you're a tenant, the agency is paying your security deposit. In many cases, you are required to submit that paperwork to your specialist. So it may be a portion, there's a portion that you have to complete usually, and there's a portion that the landlord has to complete and submit that to the housing agency. It's not an automatic thing. So please make sure you confirm what's in writing, you confirm what's going to be covered, and that you get it in writing. Here's another tip. Ask the housing authority or the housing agency directly. Don't assume. Call or email your housing specialist or your caseworker. Here's another one. As a tenant, don't move in until everything is clear, because let's say, for instance, you move in as a tenant, the housing agency isn't or hasn't paid the deposit for you, and now perhaps the landlord is harassing you for the deposit. Listen, if the deposit isn't paid, you can still be held responsible once you sign that lease. And as a tenant, here's my last tip for you. As a matter of fact, I have one more after this. If you have some sort of issue where the housing agency isn't paying it for you, request payment arrangements from that landlord and pay on the security deposit. Because if you can't afford a deposit up front, usually there are owners, there are property managers or landlords who will be lenient. They will give you some wiggle room to pay the deposit. Do the right thing and enter into a payment agreement to pay it. So you may be able to pay $100 a month or whatever the amount is, right? You have not because you ask not. If you don't ask those questions, you don't know what that landlord may be willing to do to help you out. All right. And so Sheena, let me pull up. I thought I saw a comment that came in here. I don't. So here's my last tip. Keep all receipts and all records of payments that you make towards your security deposit as a tenant. It should be documented, it should be in writing. Keep your receipts. Here's why that is important as a tenant. Don't rely on others to take care of business for you. Yes, the landlord, the property manager will have their records for their business and their business keeping, their record keeping rather. You should always keep a record of it. If you don't have a file cabinet, a file drawer, put it in some sort of folder or some pouch or an envelope and keep those documents because you may need it. And again, I live by this philosophy. It's always better to have it and not need it versus needing it and not having it. So Sheena, I'm gonna pause. I shared quite a bit. I'm gonna let you chime in here.
Um, I don't have too much more to say, but all I can ask is just for the landlords just to make sure they have understanding that we in different times at this moment. There's a lot of things backed up, and we're short on staff. A lot of different organizations, so it's just the patience. And for tenants, um, just make sure that you are um very responsible, where you're finding out everything you need to find out before you even apply for this place. And as a voucher holder, some landlords, when you're moving into units, they're not going to provide, some landlords not going to provide a stove or refrigerator where you will be responsible for you will be responsible for, not, I haven't seen too many, but there are some out here. You also will be responsible for utilities. So if you know you're not going to be able to pay your utilities, maybe you need to find something with all utilities included. I pay utilities where I am. I also pay rent where I am. So it's a whole lot to just, oh, I like this place. Let me apply and move in. Not only do you have a security deposit, you have utilities as well. Some places you don't have a washer and dryer, you might have to hook up. Some places you don't have a stove, you have to get that yourself. So having a voucher, oh yes, it's nice, but it's a big responsibility. And from my point of view, my personal perspective of it, I love it. Let me tell you why I love it. Because it gives me the opportunity to get a feel of what it would be like of me owning my own place. Because where I live at, if I need pest control, I have to pay for that. I'm responsible for pest control coming out to my home. I'm responsible for the filter in my refrigerator. I'm responsible for the filter in my HVAC system. I don't have no problem with that, because when I'm ready to go out here and own my own home, I was able to slow walk myself there and had that opportunity, had the responsibility to see what it feel like. So I love it. I have no problem with it. But there's stuff like this that how I am living over here that other tenants might jump right into and not understand that you're responsible for way more than what you think you are. So make sure you really, really find out what your responsibilities are and what does that landlord offer in their units. Will they offer a stove? Will they offer a refrigerator? Will they offer a washer and dryer? It's just not that the place is beautiful now.
I love those nuggets. I love those gems. I hope that people are picking up what you are putting down because you are hitting it right. You are hitting that nail right on the head. And so I do also want to say that in DC, landlords must treat voucher holders the same as other applicants. They cannot deny based on source of income. And being in a housing program, having a voucher, having housing assistance, that is a protected class that is considered source of income. I know that some landlords new in this space may not be as knowledgeable. But landlords, here's the thing, you're not required to waive deposits unless housing explicitly covers them. You always want to make sure that there's a signed lease because that is a legally binding document. And if a deposit isn't paid by housing or the housing agency, the tenant does remain responsible. Tenants should always avoid, like you said, Sheena, moving in without clarity or request plans if funds are short. Sheena, we did cover a lot today. I want to go back and do a recap of the tips that I shared for landlords or tenants. But before I do that, Just want to encourage all of you who have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please make sure that you take time, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me there at Landlord Lyfe. I know some of you are tuned in on Facebook. Some of you are watching by way of LinkedIn. Please go to that YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I am live and when I am online. So Sheena, let's turn to my segment called Truth or Trash. All right, so here's how it works. I'm going to share a question, and before we poll the audience, as a matter of fact, we'll poll the audience first, and then I'll get your feedback on it. So here's how it works. If it's truth, that means you agree, type truth in the comment section. If you believe the statement or the question is trash, you disagree, type trash in the comment section. All right, so here's the first one. Landlords can ask for any amount they want as a security deposit. So if you're tuned in, do you think that statement is truth, or do you think that statement is trash? Landlords can ask for any amount they want as a security deposit. Okay, I see your comments coming in. All right, so that statement is trash. Landlords cannot ask for any amount that they want. Sheena, I'm gonna let you speak to that.
So as far as the security deposit, I'm going to speak on experience because I deal with a lot of, like I said, I'm a community person. I talk to a lot of tenants and a lot of residents. So some tenants, when they have the security deposit, say for example, you have a tenant and their rent portion is probably going to be $200. You have some tenants that think that their security deposit is going to be that, when actually the unit might be $2,000. No, their security deposit is $2,000, but the tenant don't really understand. They're thinking, oh, if my rent is $200, why is my security deposit not $200 as well? So it really needs to be a clear understanding on that as well.
I definitely agree with you on that. Absolutely. I saw your comment coming in. Kim said, thought so. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to our next truth or trash statement here. Let's see here. Truth or trash. A landlord can refuse to rent to someone because they have a voucher and can't pay the deposit.
It's against the law. Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, on the YouTube channel, what do you say? Do you believe this statement is truth, or do you believe this statement is trash? A landlord can refuse to rent to someone because they have a voucher and can't pay the deposit. All right, so I see your comments coming in. Let's see here. All right, you said truth. Sheena, what do you say?
It's against the law.
Talk about that for a few seconds.
Well, I do know, I'm not too familiar on it, but I know it's against the law. I do know that a while back, DC has passed a law where you cannot refuse a Section 8 voucher holder or low income holder from applying. I do know that some units you have to have at least, I think, 20% of voucher holders or low income subsidies in every unit. But I do know that you cannot refuse a voucher holder or become discrimination.
That is a good point, and that's true. Now, that's true in DC. So here's what I will say. Check the law in your jurisdiction. So I know that Kim is tuned in. She's in a different state. But in DC, that is true, which is why I always say know what the laws are in the jurisdiction that you own, you rent, and you manage property. All right, so let me pull up one more truth or trash here. This is good. I love it. I love it. So here's our next one. Housing always pays the security deposit for voucher tenants. Now, we touched on this, but from the audience, if you're tuned in, Do you think this statement is truth or trash? Housing always pays the security deposit for voucher tenants. Housing always pay the security deposit for voucher tenants. All right, Sheena, what do you say for that one?
Housing does not always pay the security deposit for voucher tenants.
Housing does not always pay, because all voucher or all housing programs don't pay deposits. So that's definitely correct. We share quite a bit today, Sheena, and I am always excited to connect with you. You are doing a lot in the community. You are helping a lot of people. And I hope that we will continue to. Okay, I see your comment. Thank you, Kim. I hope that we will continue to make this type of impact, because a lot of people do need it, not just landlords, but tenants as well, even vice versa. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to do a quick recap of the tips that I shared for landlords, as well as the tips that I shared for tenants. So as a landlord, we encourage you to verify the voucher coverage. Make sure that whatever the security deposit amount is, that it's spelled out in the lease. We also encourage you to make sure that you stay consistent with your rental policy and the practice of your rental business. We talked about how important it is to collect money before you issue out keys, and then how to make sure you are communicating. Don't wait for the problem to be escalated, but that you also are taking those proactive steps. If you see something, if there's a problem, contact the agency and then contact the tenant to let them know, hey, listen, there's a problem. Let's talk about it. All right. So we talked about tips for tenants.
One more tip.
Okay.
This is based on my experience, because I do also assist landlords. And I had a landlord that I had to assist. And this landlord collected rent and security deposit, but did not have a rental license. So make sure before you collect any funding or accept any application, you have your rental license and all the documents that you need to up and run that unit.
That is a good point, because a lot of jurisdictions are cracking down on owners and landlords who do not have a business license, a renter's license, and especially in jurisdictions where it is required. Now, in all jurisdictions, it may not be required, but if you are owning, managing, or operating rental property in a jurisdiction that requires such, as Sheena said, please make sure that you do it, because you want to make sure that you're treating your business like a business so that it can pay you like a business. You don't want to make the mistake of renting that property out and you don't have it, and then you get yourself caught up in a whirlwind of trouble that is going to cost you a lot of money to get out of, right? Because when that tenant is in your property, that's still your tenant. So you have the responsibility of dealing with any fines, any fees, any court costs if you're taking a court. And some, Sheena, I think you already know this, some landlords are learning the hard way. Yeah, you don't want to end up on that side of the aisle. So Sheena, I am going to share some, the recap, the tips for tenants, and then I'm going to let you chime in on this as well. As a tenant, these were our tips for you on today. Confirm what's covered before you move into that rental property. You want to always ask the housing agency directly. Maybe it's not the housing authority. Listen, whatever housing program you're in, ask them directly what you're responsible for. Don't move in until everything is clear, because even after you move in, if the agency is not paying it for you, you may be up a creek without a paddle if you don't have this money for the landlord. You also can consider requesting payment arrangements. Now, all landlords may not agree to that, but you don't know unless you ask. And a good book that I read says, You have not because you ask not. You ask, it shall be given, right? So ask and see if it works out in your favor. And then you want to keep all receipts. You want to keep all records of anything that you pay towards that security deposit and maintain that record as long as you live in that rental property. Sheena, I'm going to pause. I'm going to let you touch on the tips that we shared for tenants on today before we wrap up.
Okay, so my advice to tenants when you're dealing with a landlord or just anybody anywhere dealing with business period, because I'm seeing a lot of it, who shouting and screaming and cussing your landlord out and using foul language, that's not going to get you anywhere. You're talking at them, you're not talking to them. So it's a difference. So pleasantly, gratefully, humbly talk to your landlord like you got some sense. And maybe they will help you and assist you. That's all I got to say about that.
That's a good point. Thank you for that advice. Thank you for that sound advice, almost doctrine, right? I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Sheena. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure. Um, I watch what you're doing, and I'm excited for how you are positively impacting not just tenants, but landlords as well. And so that's what we do. We take knowledge, we learn, we grow, and we share it with others. And that's how we can be of a greater impact in the rental community. So, Sheena, before we wrap up, do you want to have any last words before we close out for this segment today?
My last words is patience, making sure that you have crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's, and you make sure you walk that property, you assess that property, making sure that you know what you're moving into, making sure that you sit down and do your budget before you even move in, making sure that you, if there's any utilities, any appliances you have to get or receive. And it's from a landlord aspect. I do know a lot of landlords because I've ran into the problems myself, by me being on disability, wouldn't accept me because of my income. But I'm perfectly fine. I'm managing. I don't owe anything. I'm managing. So I just hope that a lot of landlords give people on disability and low income more opportunities. Now I do understand that it's what they call it, I can't even get the word out right now, from past or present tenants. I do understand. So I understand from both sides, but not everyone is like that. Some of us out here really want and we really want to try. So from that point, I just think just screen your tenants a little more better.
Beautiful, beautiful words, well spoken. Thank you so much. And again, Sheena, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that this has been impactful. This has been helpful. I saw a comment that came in. Someone, thank you, Kim. She thank you. And again, I thank you. I do appreciate you. All right. And I know that we're going to have more segments, upcoming topics, and I'll bring you back on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
All right, so today was all about security deposit, and here's what I want to say. Security deposits should never be a mystery. They're not just about money. It's about trust. It's about responsibility. It's about clear communication between landlords, tenants, and housing programs. And if there is one takeaway from tonight, it's this: do not move forward until everything is clear and everything is in writing, because when both sides understand what's expected, conflict is avoided and relationships are stronger. I'll leave you with this one quote from Maya Angelou. She said this: when you know better, you do better. And that's what this conversation was all about today: helping landlords and tenants understand that when you know better, you do better so that you can work together. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. My time is up. I absolutely thank you for yours. And again, if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. There you can find me at Landlord Lyfe. My time is up. I absolutely thank you for yours. I look forward to seeing you all next Monday right here. I'm live on Facebook, I'm live on LinkedIn, and I am live on YouTube. I appreciate you. It has been a fantastic pleasure. And again, thank you to my special guest, Sheena, for joining me today. I do Appreciate her. She works hard in the community, and I promise I will definitely have her back on. So until then, be great, be amazing, and stay informed. We look forward to seeing you all next week right here, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.